Part 1. The day everything changed. Daniel woke up at 6:30 on a cold Monday morning. He opened his eyes, looked at the ceiling, and stayed in bed for a few seconds. He did not want to get up. It was not because he was tired. He had slept for almost 8 hours. It was because he did not want to go to work. Daniel was 28 years old and worked in a small office in the center of the city. He had been working there for almost 4 years. Every morning was almost the same. He woke up at 6:30. He took a shower. He made a cup of coffee. Then he took the bus to work. At 9 o'clock he sat at his desk. At 5:30 he went home. He did the same thing again the next day, and the next day, and the next. Daniel looked at his phone. There were 3 messages from his friends. One friend was talking about a trip to the beach. Another friend had just started a new job. The third friend had sent a photo of a small house in the countryside. Daniel smiled for a moment. Then he put his phone down. He looked around his small apartment. Everything was clean, but there was nothing special about the room. A small table stood near the window. There was an old sofa in the corner. His computer was on the desk. A few books were sitting on a shelf. Daniel had everything he needed, but somehow he felt that something was missing. He got out of bed and walked to the kitchen. While he was making coffee, he looked through the window. People were already walking down the street. Cars were moving slowly through the morning traffic. A woman was walking her dog. A man was riding a bicycle. A little boy was holding his mother's hand as they crossed the street. Everyone seemed to be going somewhere. Daniel took a sip of coffee. "Where am I going?" he quietly asked himself. He did not have an answer. He finished his coffee, put on his jacket, and left his apartment. On the bus, Daniel found a seat near the window. He put on his headphones, but he did not play any music. Instead, he watched the city. He had seen these streets hundreds of times, but that morning, they looked different. Maybe he was simply thinking too much. Maybe he was just having a bad day. When Daniel arrived at the office, he walked to his desk and turned on his computer. His manager, Mr. Harris, walked past him. "Good morning, Daniel." "Good morning. Are you ready for today's meeting?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." The meeting started at 10. Daniel sat around a large table with 6 other employees. Mr. Harris opened his laptop and began talking about the company's plans for the next year. Everyone listened carefully. Daniel tried to listen too, but his mind was somewhere else. He looked at the people around the table. Some of them were taking notes. Some were looking at their computers. One man was checking his phone under the table. Daniel suddenly wondered how many of them were happy with their lives. He wondered if they also woke up every morning and asked themselves the same question: why am I doing this? After the meeting, Daniel returned to his desk. His colleague Emma sat down beside him. "You look tired," she said. "I'm okay." Emma looked at him. "No, you're not." Daniel smiled. "How do you know?" "Because you have been looking at the same screen for 5 minutes. Daniel looked at his computer. He realized she was right. He had not moved his mouse. Emma laughed. "You need a vacation." "Maybe. You should come with us this weekend." "Where?" "We're going hiking." Daniel shook his head. "I don't think so." "Why not?" "I have too much work." Emma smiled. "You always have too much work." Daniel did not answer. Emma stood up. "Think about it." Then she walked back to her desk. Daniel watched her leave. He knew she was right. He always had an excuse. There was always something more important. Work, money, responsibilities, tomorrow. He always told himself that he would do the things he wanted to do later. But later seemed to move further away every year. That afternoon, Daniel received an email from his manager. The subject was simple: important meeting. He opened it. Mr. Harris wanted to see him at 4 o'clock. Daniel felt nervous. He did not know why. Maybe it was about his work. Maybe there was a problem with one of his projects. At 4, he walked into Mr. Harris's office. "Come in, Daniel. Sit down." Daniel sat in the chair. Mr. Harris closed the door. "I have something important to discuss with you. The company is changing." "I know. We are moving some departments to another city." Daniel looked at him. "Another city?" "Yes. Mr. Harris took a deep breath. "And your department is one of them." Daniel did not say anything. "When will this happen?" he finally asked. "In about 2 months." Daniel looked down at his hands. 2 months. Only 2 months. What happens if I don't move? Mr. Harris was quiet for a moment. "Then you will have to leave the company." Daniel felt something strange inside him. He had expected to feel afraid. He had expected to worry about money. Instead, he felt something else. Relief. It surprised him. He had spent 4 years trying to keep this job. He had worked late. He had answered emails at night. He had canceled plans with friends. He had told himself that having a stable job was the most important thing. And now, when that stability was disappearing, part of him felt free. Mr. Harris continued talking. "You have 2 months to decide." Daniel nodded. "Thank you." He left the office. He returned to his desk, but he could not concentrate. 2 months. He could move to another city. He could stay and find another job. He could do something completely different. For the first time in years, he had to make a real decision. That evening, Daniel did not take the bus home immediately. Instead, he walked. He walked through the busy streets without thinking about where he was going. The sun was beginning to disappear behind the buildings. People were leaving work. Restaurants were opening. Streetlights were turning on. Daniel stopped at a small park. He sat on a bench. An old man was sitting a few meters away. The man was feeding birds. Daniel watched him for a while. The old man noticed him. "Long day?" he asked. Daniel smiled. "Very long." The old man nodded. "Sometimes a long day is exactly what we need." Daniel looked at him. "What do you mean?" The old man smiled. "Because it makes us stop." "Stop?" "Yes. Most people are always running." Daniel looked around the park. The old man continued. "They run to work. They run home. They run after money. They run after success." He threw a few pieces of bread onto the ground. But one day they stop and realize they don't know why they were running. Daniel was surprised. The old man sounded like he knew exactly what Daniel was thinking. "Have you ever felt that way?" Daniel asked. The old man laughed. "Of course." "Then what did you do?" The old man looked at the birds. "I made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "I waited too long." Daniel became quiet. The old man continued. "I spent most of my life doing what other people thought I should do." Daniel listened carefully. "I worked hard. I made money. I bought a house. I raised a family. I did everything people told me was important. Was it a bad life?" "No." The old man smiled. "It was a good life." Then his smile disappeared. "But I always wanted to paint." Daniel looked at him. "Paint?" "Yes. I loved painting when I was young." "What happened?" "Life happened." The old man laughed softly. "I told myself I would paint when I had more time." Daniel knew that sentence. He had said it many times. "When I finish this project, when I have more money, when things become easier, when I am less busy." The old man looked at Daniel. "Do you know what happens when you keep waiting?" Daniel shook his head. "You become very good at waiting." For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The city was becoming darker. The birds flew away. The old man stood up slowly. "I should go home." Daniel stood too. "Thank you." "For what?" "I don't know." Daniel smiled. "Then maybe you needed to hear it." He walked away. Daniel stayed on the bench. He looked up at the sky. He thought about the meeting. He thought about his job. He thought about the things he had always wanted to do. When he was a child, Daniel wanted to travel. He wanted to learn another language. He wanted to take photographs. He wanted to write stories. He wanted to see the ocean. But as he grew older, those dreams became smaller. Not because he stopped wanting them, because he stopped making time for them. Daniel took out his phone. He opened the Notes app. For a moment he did not know what to write. Then he typed one sentence. "What would I do if I wasn't afraid?" He stared at the question. He did not write an answer. Not yet. He put his phone back into his pocket. Then he walked home. That night, Daniel could not sleep. He lay in bed and looked at the ceiling. The room was dark. His phone was beside him. He picked it up. He looked at the question again. What would I do if I wasn't afraid? He thought about his job. He thought about money. He thought about his parents. He thought about what people might say. Then another question came into his mind. What if I regret staying? Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time in a long time, he realized something important. Fear was not always telling him to stop. Sometimes fear was simply telling him that something mattered. The next morning, Daniel woke up before his alarm. It was 6:15. He sat up. He did not feel excited. He did not have a perfect plan. He still had many questions. But something had changed. He got out of bed. He made coffee. He opened his notebook. At the top of the first page, he wrote, "Things I want to do before I am too old to start." Then he began writing. Travel, learn English, take photographs, write, see the ocean, meet new people, try something new. He looked at the list. It was not a life plan. It was just a beginning. But sometimes a beginning doesn't need to be big. Sometimes it is only one sentence written in a notebook. Daniel closed the notebook. Then he smiled. For the first time in years, tomorrow did not feel like a copy of today. It felt like a question, and Daniel was finally ready to find the answer. Part 2. The First Step. For the next few days, Daniel carried his notebook everywhere. He did not tell anyone about it, not his friends, not his parents, not even Emma. Every morning, before leaving his apartment, he opened the notebook and looked at the list. Travel, learn English, take photographs, write, see the ocean, meet new people, try something new. The list was simple, maybe too simple. But every time Daniel looked at it, he felt something inside him become a little lighter. There was only one problem. He had no idea where to start. On Tuesday morning, Daniel sat at his desk and opened his computer. He had a normal amount of work to do, but he could not stop thinking about his list. He opened a search page. He typed, "How to change your life." He looked at the results. There were thousands of articles. Wake up at 5, exercise every morning, start a business, quit your job, move to another country, read 50 books a year. Daniel stared at the screen. He closed the page. "Everyone makes it sound so easy," he whispered. He opened his notebook again. Maybe changing his life did not mean doing something huge. Maybe it meant doing one small thing. He thought about English. He had studied English at school for many years. He could understand simple sentences. He knew many words. But when someone spoke English quickly, he often became lost. He wanted to travel one day, and if he really wanted to travel, English could help him talk to people from different countries. So Daniel made a decision. He would learn English. Not because someone told him to, not because he needed a certificate. He simply wanted to understand people. He wanted to watch movies without subtitles. He wanted to order food in another country without being afraid. He wanted to have conversations. It was a small goal, but it was his goal. That evening, Daniel searched for an English listening lesson. He found a short video. He put on his headphones. The speaker began talking. Daniel listened. He understood the first sentence, then the second. Then the speaker started talking faster. Daniel paused the video. What did he say? He played it again. He still did not understand. He played it a third time. This time, he understood one word, then another. Daniel laughed. This is going to take a while. But he kept going. For 30 minutes he listened. He did not understand everything. In fact, he probably understood less than half. But when he finished, he felt strangely happy. He had done something new. The next day he did it again, 30 minutes, then again on Thursday and Friday. By the end of the week, Daniel had created a small routine. Every night after work, he spent 30 minutes learning English. Sometimes he listened to stories. Sometimes he watched short conversations. Sometimes he repeated sentences aloud. His pronunciation was not perfect. His grammar was not perfect. But he did not care. He was learning because he wanted to. On Saturday morning, Emma called him. "Are you coming hiking?" Daniel looked at his notebook. Then he looked at his shoes. I think I am. Emma laughed. Really? I thought you were going to say you were busy. So did I. 2 hours later, Daniel met Emma and 3 other friends at the train station. They were going to a small mountain outside the city. Daniel had not gone hiking in years. The last time he had done it was when he was in college. Back then, he had enjoyed walking. He had enjoyed being outside. He had enjoyed taking pictures. But after starting his job, he slowly stopped doing those things. The train left the station at 8:30. Daniel sat beside Emma. She looked at him. You seem different. Different? Yes. How? I don't know, she smiled. You look less tired. Daniel laughed. Maybe I slept well. Maybe. She looked out the window. So, what happened at work? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he told her about the meeting. The company wants us to move. Emma turned toward him. Seriously? Yes. Are you going? I don't know. What do you want? Daniel looked at her. I don't know. Emma smiled. That's the first honest answer you've given. Daniel laughed. Thanks. I'm serious. She paused. Maybe not knowing is okay. What do you mean? You don't have to know exactly what you want for the next 10 years. Daniel looked out the window. You don't? No. Emma shook her head. You just need to know what you want to do next. Daniel thought about that. What did he want to do next? He wanted to learn. He wanted to travel. He wanted to take photographs. He wanted to write. He wanted to see the ocean. But could he really do all those things? The train continued through the countryside. The buildings slowly disappeared. Green fields replaced the city. Daniel watched the landscape. For the first time in a long time, he was not thinking about his email. He was not thinking about his manager. He was not thinking about tomorrow's meeting. He was simply looking out the window. When they arrived, they started walking. The path was not difficult, but it was long. After an hour, Daniel was tired. Do you want to stop? Emma asked. No. You look exhausted. I said no. Emma laughed. Okay, Mr. Determined. They continued walking. Along the way, Daniel noticed small things he would normally ignore. A yellow flower growing between 2 rocks. A bird sitting on a tree branch. Sunlight moving through the leaves. A small stream running beside the path. He took out his phone and took a picture. Emma noticed. Photography? Maybe. What? One of the things on my list. What list? Daniel stopped walking. He had forgotten that he had not told her. He opened his backpack and took out the notebook. Emma read the list. She looked at him. This is good. You think so? Yes. She pointed at the words. You wrote try something new. Yes. Then you're doing it. Daniel smiled. Maybe she was right. That afternoon they reached the top of the mountain. The view was beautiful. The city was far away. Daniel sat on a rock. He took another photograph. Then another. Then he put his phone away. He simply looked. Emma sat beside him. You know what I like about this place? She asked. What? It reminds me that our problems are usually smaller than we think. Daniel smiled. I've been thinking about that. They stayed there for almost an hour. Before going home, Daniel opened his notebook again. Under his list, he wrote another sentence. Small steps still move you forward. He looked at it for a moment. Then he closed the notebook. That night, Daniel returned home exhausted. He took a shower, ate dinner, and sat at his desk. Normally, he would have opened his work email. Instead, he opened his English lesson. He listened for 30 minutes. Then he opened his notebook. He wrote down 5 new English words. Travel, journey, courage, change, opportunity. He looked at the last word. Opportunity. He had never thought of his situation as an opportunity. He had thought of it as a problem. But maybe it could be both. Maybe a problem could also be a door. The next morning, Daniel made another decision. He would not wait 2 months to decide what to do. He would use the 2 months to prepare. He started looking for new jobs. He updated his resume. He contacted an old friend who worked in another company. He searched for photography classes. He looked at English courses. He even searched for cheap flights. For the first time in years, Daniel was planning something that belonged to him. But then reality arrived. On Monday afternoon, his manager called him into the office. "Daniel, we need to talk." Daniel sat down. Mr. Harris looked serious. "I've reviewed your recent work." Daniel waited. "You've been doing well. Thank you. I want to offer you a promotion." Daniel was surprised. "A promotion?" "Yes." Mr. Harris explained the new position. More responsibility, more money, a better title. But there was one condition. Daniel would have to move to the new city, and he would have to sign a 3-year contract. Daniel listened carefully. The salary was much higher than his current salary. It was more money than he had ever earned. For a few seconds, he imagined his life. A bigger apartment, a better car, more savings, more security. It was exactly the kind of opportunity he had always wanted. Mr. Harris looked at him. "You don't have to answer today." Daniel nodded. "Thank you." He walked back to his desk. His heart was beating quickly. The notebook was inside his bag. He took it out. He looked at the list. Travel, learn English, take photographs, write, see the ocean, meet new people, try something new. Then he looked at the job offer. More money, more responsibility, 3 years. Daniel suddenly understood why making a decision was difficult. The problem was not choosing between a good life and a bad life. The problem was choosing between two different good lives. One life was safe, the other was uncertain. One gave him money, the other gave him freedom. But was freedom really better? Daniel did not know. That evening he called his mother. They talked for a few minutes about ordinary things. Then Daniel told her about the promotion. His mother was silent. "That's wonderful," she said. "Do you think I should take it?" "Of course." Daniel was surprised by how quickly she answered. "Why?" "Because you worked hard for it." Daniel looked down. "But what if I don't want it?" His mother was quiet. "Then don't take it." Daniel smiled. "That's not what you said 5 seconds ago." She laughed. "I'm your mother. I want you to have a good life." "What is a good life?" His mother did not answer immediately. Then she said, "Only you can answer that." Daniel became quiet. She continued, "Your father and I spent many years worrying about what was safe." She paused. "Sometimes we forgot to ask what made us happy." Daniel looked at the notebook. "Do you regret anything?" His mother laughed softly. "Everyone has regrets." "Do you?" "Yes." "What?" She was quiet again. "I regret not spending enough time with my family when you were young." Daniel did not know what to say. "I thought working harder would give us a better future," she said. "And did it?" "Yes." She paused. "But I learned something." "What?" "The future is not useful if you forget to live today." Daniel closed his eyes. Those words stayed in his mind. The future is not useful if you forget to live today. After the call ended, Daniel sat by the window. The city was quiet. He thought about the promotion. He thought about the old man in the park. He thought about Emma. He thought about his mother. And then he thought about himself. What did Daniel actually want? He opened his notebook. He wrote a new question. "If I accept this job, what will my life look like in 3 years?" He imagined it. He would have more money, more experience, maybe a bigger apartment, maybe a better position. But would he still have the courage to change his life 3 years later? He did not know. Then he wrote another question. "If I say no, what will happen?" He might struggle. He might fail. He might have less money. He might regret it. But he might also discover something new. Daniel closed the notebook. He still had no answer, and that frightened him. Because sometimes the hardest part of growing is realizing that nobody can make the decision for you. Not your parents, not your friends, not your manager, not even the people who love you most. You have to choose. The next morning, Daniel arrived at work early. He walked into the office. He looked at his desk. The same computer, the same chair, the same walls, but something felt different. Maybe the office had not changed. Maybe he had. He opened his email. There was a new message from Mr. Harris. The subject said, "Promotion offer." Daniel stared at the screen. His finger moved toward the mouse. He was about to open the email when his phone rang. It was Emma. Daniel answered. "Hello? Where are you?" "At work." Good. I need to tell you something. What happened? A photography competition. Daniel sat up. What kind of competition? The winner gets a trip overseas. Daniel smiled. Really? Yes. When is the deadline? Tomorrow. Daniel looked at his notebook. Tomorrow. He had always waited for the perfect moment. But maybe the perfect moment was simply the moment when he finally decided to begin. Send me the information, he said. Are you going to enter? Daniel looked at the promotion email on his computer. Then he looked at the notebook beside him. He smiled. I think I am. Emma laughed. That's the Daniel I remember. After the call, Daniel opened the competition page. He read the rules. 1 photograph, 1 story. The photograph had to show a moment that changed the way you saw the world. Daniel looked at the pictures on his phone. The mountain, the flowers, the train, the city. Then he stopped. He remembered the old man in the park. He remembered the birds. He remembered the sentence, "You become very good at waiting." Daniel knew exactly what photograph he wanted to submit. But there was one problem. He had not taken a photograph of the old man. He had only taken a photograph of the birds. He looked at it. The birds were flying away from the bench. The old man was sitting in the background. His face was not clear. But somehow, Daniel liked the picture. It was not perfect. Neither was his life. Maybe that was the point. He opened a new document. At the top he wrote a title. Before it is too late. Then he began writing. For the first time in years, Daniel was not writing because someone had asked him to. He was writing because he had something to say. And he did not know it yet, but the small decision he was making that morning would lead him somewhere he never expected. Sometimes, life changes quietly, not with a loud announcement, not with fireworks. Sometimes it begins with a notebook, a small decision, a simple photograph, or one sentence that stays in your mind. For Daniel, that sentence was waiting. And he was finally learning that waiting was not the same as living. Part 3. The Choice. Daniel finished writing his story late that night. He read it twice. Then he read it a third time. It was not perfect. Some sentences were too long. Some ideas were not clear. But Daniel did not delete them. For the first time, he was not trying to make something perfect. He was simply trying to make something real. He attached the photograph of the birds flying over the old man. Then he submitted the entry. The website showed a simple message. Your submission has been received. Daniel stared at the screen. That was it. There was nothing else. No music. No celebration. No one standing beside him. But Daniel smiled. He had done something he had been afraid to do. He had taken a chance. The next morning, he went to work as usual. But something had changed. He no longer felt trapped by his job. He might stay. He might leave. He might accept the promotion. He might look for something completely different. For the first time, he understood that uncertainty was not the same as failure. Still, he had to make a decision. The deadline for the promotion was getting closer. He had only 1 week left. During lunch, Daniel sat alone in a small restaurant near the office. He opened his notebook. Under the question, "What would I do if I wasn't afraid?" he had written several answers. Travel, photography, writing, learning English. But he had not written anything about his career. Maybe that was because he was afraid to admit the truth. He did not hate his job. That was the problem. If he hated it, leaving would be easy. But he did not hate it. His coworkers were kind. His salary was good. His manager respected him. The office was comfortable. Everything was fine. And sometimes, fine can be harder to leave than something terrible. Daniel finished his lunch and returned to work. At 3:30, Emma walked over. "Any news?" "About what?" "The promotion." Daniel sighed. "Not yet. You have to decide soon." "I know." Emma pulled a chair toward his desk. "What are you really thinking?" Daniel looked at her. "I don't know." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." Emma was quiet. Then she asked, "If money wasn't a problem, what would you do?" Daniel did not answer immediately. He looked at his notebook. "I would travel." "Where?" "Anywhere." She smiled. "That's not a place." "I know." "Okay, where first?" Daniel thought. "The ocean." "You've never seen the ocean?" "Not since I was a child." "Then go." "Just like that?" Why not? Because I have a job. Take a few days off. I have responsibilities. You always have responsibilities. Daniel smiled. Emma stood up. Sometimes you don't need to change your whole life. You just need to remind yourself that you have one. Then she walked away. That sentence stayed with Daniel. You have a life. He wrote it down. That evening, he searched for train tickets. There was a small coastal town about 5 hours away. He had never been there. He found a cheap hotel. He looked at the price. It was affordable. He could go for 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. No big plan, no expensive vacation, just a train ticket and a small backpack. Daniel hesitated. Then he bought the ticket. His heart beat faster after the payment was completed. He had no idea why. It was only a weekend trip, but somehow it felt bigger. On Saturday morning, Daniel arrived at the train station. He had a backpack, his camera, his notebook, and his headphones. The train was crowded. He found his seat near the window. As the train moved away from the city, Daniel felt his shoulders relax. He watched buildings disappear. Then fields appeared, then small towns, then hills. He put on his headphones. Instead of music, he played an English listening story. The speaker talked about traveling alone. Daniel listened carefully. He understood most of it. A few weeks earlier, he would have stopped the recording every few seconds. Now, he could follow the story. He smiled. Small steps. That was when he was learning. The train arrived at the coast around noon. Daniel stepped onto the platform. The air smelled different. He could hear the sound of waves in the distance. He followed the road toward the beach. Then he saw it. The ocean. Daniel stopped walking. For a few seconds, he simply stood there. He had seen pictures of the ocean thousands of times. He had watched movies about beaches. But seeing it in real life was different. The water seemed endless. The waves moved toward the shore and disappeared again. Daniel took out his camera. He took a picture, then another, but after a few minutes, he put the camera away. Some moments did not need to be photographed. They needed to be experienced. Daniel walked along the beach. He took off his shoes. The sand was warm. He sat near the water. He opened his notebook. At the top of the page, he wrote, "I finally came." He looked at the sentence. It seemed almost funny. He had wanted to see the ocean for years, and now he was sitting beside it. Why had he waited so long? He did not have an answer. Maybe there was no good reason. Maybe people simply became used to saying later. Daniel closed the notebook. A little girl was building a sandcastle nearby. Her father was helping her. The castle kept falling apart. Every time it fell, the girl laughed and started again. Daniel watched them. Children did not seem afraid of starting again. Adults were different. Adults wanted guarantees. They wanted to know that their plans would work before they started. They wanted to know that the relationship would last, that the business would succeed, that the new job would be better, that the journey would be worth the money. But life did not offer guarantees. The little girl built another sandcastle. The wave came. It disappeared. She laughed. Daniel smiled. Maybe there was a lesson in that. He spent the afternoon walking around the town. He found a small cafe near the beach. He ordered a sandwich and orange juice. The woman behind the counter smiled. "Are you traveling alone?" "Yes." "First time?" Daniel nodded. She gave him his drink. "Enjoy it." "Thank you." Daniel sat near the window. He opened his notebook again. This time he wrote, "Maybe courage is not feeling brave. Maybe courage is doing something even when you are afraid." He looked at the sentence. He liked it. That evening he walked back to the beach. The sun was setting. The sky slowly changed color. Daniel sat on the sand. His phone vibrated. It was an email. He opened it. The photography competition. His heart started beating faster. He read the first line. "Congratulations." Daniel stopped. He read it again. "Congratulations. Your photograph has been selected as one of the finalists." Daniel stared at the screen. He could not believe it. There were hundreds of entries, maybe thousands, and his photograph had been selected. He laughed. Then he looked at the ocean. He wanted to call someone. He called Emma first. She answered immediately. "Did you get the promotion?" "No." What happened? I made the photography final. There was silence. Then Emma shouted, You did what? Daniel laughed. I made the final. Daniel! She was laughing too. Congratulations! Thank you. See, I told you. You didn't tell me anything about photography. I told you to try. Daniel looked at the ocean. I think I needed to hear that. They talked for almost 20 minutes. After the call, Daniel's phone rang again. This time, it was his mother. He told her the news. She was happy. Then she asked, So, are you going to become a photographer now? Daniel laughed. I don't know. His mother laughed too. You really don't know anything these days. Apparently not. Maybe that's good. Daniel smiled. After the call ended, he sat alone. He looked at the ocean. He felt happy. But underneath the happiness, there was something else. Fear. A photography competition was not just a small hobby anymore. If he won, he would receive a trip overseas. He would have to travel alone. He would have to use his photography skills. He would have to write about his experience. And suddenly, Daniel realized something. He was afraid of winning. The thought surprised him. He had spent his whole life believing that success was the thing he wanted. But now that success was close, he was scared. What if people expected more from him? What if he was not good enough? What if this was just luck? What if he failed in front of everyone? Daniel laughed quietly. He had spent years waiting for an opportunity. Now he had one, and his first reaction was to be afraid. He looked at the waves. They came toward the shore. They broke. Then they disappeared. Another wave came. Then another. The ocean did not ask whether each wave would be perfect. It simply kept moving. Daniel took a deep breath. Maybe he could do the same. The next morning, Daniel returned home. On Monday, he went to work. Mr. Harris called him into his office. I need your answer. Daniel sat down. The promotion? Yes. Daniel looked at the contract. He had read it several times. The salary was excellent. The position was secure. But something inside him was still saying no. Mr. Harris looked at him. Daniel, this is a good opportunity. I know. You've worked hard for it. I know. You seem uncertain. I am. Mr. Harris leaned back. Can I ask you something? Sure. What do you actually want? Daniel looked at him. The question felt strange. No one had asked him that at work before. He thought for a moment. I want to try something different. Mr. Harris nodded slowly. Does that mean you're leaving? I don't know yet. Mr. Harris smiled. You've changed. Daniel smiled too. Maybe. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Daniel stood up. Can I have one more day? One more day. Thank you. Daniel returned to his desk. He looked at the office. He realized he was not angry with the company. He was not angry with his manager. He was not even unhappy. He was simply ready to find out who he could become outside this place. Daniel received another email. It was from the photography competition. The final result would be announced in 3 days. Daniel stared at the message. 3 days. At the same time, he had to make one of the biggest decisions of his life. He went home that evening and opened his notebook. He wrote 2 columns. Stay, leave. Under stay, he wrote, more money, more security, career growth, good company. Under leave, he wrote, more freedom, time to travel, time to learn, time to write, time to take photographs. Then he stopped. He added one more line, chance to discover myself. Daniel looked at the page for a long time. Then he realized something important. He was not really choosing between 2 jobs. He was choosing between 2 versions of himself. The first version wanted safety. The second wanted possibility. Neither version was wrong, but only one could make the decision. Daniel closed the notebook. He did not sleep much that night. The next morning, he woke up before his alarm. He made coffee. He sat at the table. Then he opened his computer. He wrote an email to Mr. Harris. He stared at the screen for almost 10 minutes. His finger hovered over the send button. His heart was beating quickly. Then he remembered the old man. You become very good at waiting. Daniel smiled. He clicked send. The email was gone. His decision was made. He had turned down the promotion. For the first time, Daniel had chosen uncertainty. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know if he would find another job. He did not know if photography would become anything more than a hobby. He did not know if he would travel overseas, but he knew one thing. He had stopped waiting for his life to begin. That afternoon, Emma walked over to his desk. "You did it." Daniel nodded. "I did it." "How do you feel?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Terrified." Emma laughed. "Good." "Good?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because it means you care." Daniel smiled. Then his phone vibrated. He looked at the screen. Another email from the photography competition. He opened it. This time the first line said, "Dear Daniel, we are pleased to inform you." He stopped reading. His eyes widened. He looked at Emma. "What's wrong?" she asked. Daniel slowly turned the phone toward her. Emma read the message. Then she looked at him. "You won." Daniel did not move. "You won." He stared at the screen. The prize was a trip to another country, a trip he had never imagined taking, a trip he had dreamed about for years, and now it was real. But there was one problem. The trip would begin in 3 weeks, and Daniel had no idea what kind of life he was going to return to. He looked at the message again. For years, he had been waiting for the right moment. Now the moment had arrived, and suddenly, the future looked much bigger than he had imagined. Part 4. The Journey. For the next 3 weeks, Daniel's life moved faster than ever. He had turned down the promotion. He had submitted his resignation. He had started looking for a new direction. And now, he was preparing for his first trip overseas. Sometimes, he still could not believe it. 3 months earlier, he had been sitting at the same desk every day, doing the same work, living the same routine. Now, he was packing a suitcase. His destination was a small country he had only seen in photographs. The photography competition would pay for his flight and hotel. Daniel would spend 10 days there. He was expected to take photographs and write about his experience. It sounded exciting. It also sounded terrifying. 2 days before the trip, Daniel sat on the floor of his apartment. His suitcase was open. Inside were shirts, pants, a jacket, a pair of shoes, his camera, and a small notebook. He checked everything twice, then 3 times. His passport was on the table. His flight ticket was on his phone. His hotel information was printed and placed inside his bag. Everything was ready. Almost. Daniel looked at his English notes. He had been studying every night. He could understand much more than before, but he still worried about speaking. What if someone asked him a question? What if he did not understand? What if he needed help? What if he got lost? His old fears were returning. Daniel picked up his phone and called Emma. "Are you ready?" "Almost." "Are you nervous?" "Very." "Good." Daniel laughed. "You always say that, because nervous means you're doing something new." "I think I'm nervous enough for 10 people." Emma laughed. "Just remember one thing." "What?" "You don't have to be perfect." Daniel looked at his suitcase. "Easy for you to say." "I'm serious. You don't have to speak perfect English. You don't have to take perfect photographs. You don't have to know everything." "Then what do I have to do?" "Pay attention." Daniel smiled. "Pay attention?" "Yes. You're going there to experience something, not to pass an exam." Daniel thought about that. Maybe she was right. The next morning, Daniel went to his parents' house. His mother had prepared lunch. His father was sitting in the living room, reading the newspaper. Daniel showed them his passport. His mother looked at it. "Your first trip overseas?" "Yes." She smiled. "You look like a little boy." "Thanks. I mean it in a good way." His father laughed. At lunch they talked about the trip. His mother asked many questions. Where would he stay? What would he eat? Who would he meet? Would he be careful? Daniel answered everything. Then his father asked a different question. "What will you do when you come back?" Daniel paused. "I don't know." His father nodded. "Good." Daniel looked at him. "Why is that good?" "Because you don't need to know yet." His father folded the newspaper. Sometimes we think we need a 5-year plan, don't we? Plans are useful. He paused, but life does not always follow them. Daniel smiled. His father continued, "You thought you needed a better job." Daniel nodded. "Then you discovered you wanted something else." "Yes." "You thought you needed money." "Yes." "Then you discovered you needed time." Daniel became quiet. His father looked at him. "Maybe that is your lesson." "What lesson?" "Sometimes we spend our whole lives collecting things." "Things?" "Money, titles, possessions, achievements." He paused. "And then one day, we realize what we really wanted was time." Daniel thought about his old routine. He remembered all the evenings he had spent at the office, all the weekends he had spent answering emails, all the plans he had canceled. His father was right. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the airport. He had traveled by plane before, but never alone for such a long journey. He checked in, passed security, found his gate, then he sat down. There were hundreds of people around him, families, business travelers, students, tourists. Everyone was going somewhere. Daniel looked at the people and wondered about their stories. Maybe every person was carrying a dream. Maybe every person was carrying a fear. Maybe everyone was trying to find something. His flight was announced. Daniel stood up. He took a deep breath. "Let's do this." The flight was long. Daniel watched movies. He listened to English stories. He looked out the window. At one point, the clouds disappeared, and he saw the ocean below. It looked endless. He smiled. A few hours later, the plane landed. Daniel stepped into the airport. The signs were in a language he did not know. People were speaking English around him. Fast English. Very fast English. Daniel suddenly understood how different listening to English on a computer was from listening to real people. A man near him asked something. Daniel froze. "Sorry?" The man repeated himself. Daniel listened carefully. "Do you need help finding the train?" "Oh," Daniel smiled. "Yes, please." The man pointed toward the station. "Go downstairs, then follow the blue signs." "Thank you." Daniel walked away. His heart was beating quickly. He had understood. Not everything, but enough. He smiled. His English was not perfect, but it worked. That was enough. Daniel found the train. He sat beside the window. The city outside was completely unfamiliar. The buildings looked different. The streets looked different. Even the sounds were different. Daniel took out his camera. He took photographs through the window. When he arrived at the hotel, he checked in. The room was small but comfortable. He placed his suitcase beside the bed. Then he looked at the clock. It was already evening. He was tired, very tired. Part of him wanted to stay in the room, but another part remembered why he had come. He picked up his camera. Then he went outside. The streets were full of people. Restaurants were crowded. Music came from small shops. Children were running through the streets. Daniel walked without a plan. He took photographs. A woman selling flowers. An old man reading a newspaper. Two friends laughing outside a restaurant. A young musician playing guitar on the street. A couple holding hands. None of the photographs were extraordinary, but they were real. Daniel realized that was what he liked about photography. It made him slow down. When he looked through the camera, he noticed things he normally missed. He noticed light, faces, movement, silence, small moments. He walked for 2 hours. Then he saw a small restaurant. He was hungry. He walked inside. A waiter came over. "Table for one?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." The waiter gave him a menu. Daniel looked at it. There were many unfamiliar dishes. He decided to try something new. He pointed at a picture. "I'll have this, please." The waiter smiled. "Good choice." Daniel sat down. He looked around. Nobody knew him. Nobody knew what job he had. Nobody knew how much money he made. Nobody cared about his past. He was simply Daniel, a traveler sitting alone in a small restaurant. And strangely, he liked it. After dinner, he walked back to the hotel. He opened his notebook. He wrote, "Being unknown can be freeing." Then he stopped. He thought about the sentence. Back home, Daniel had always worried about what people thought. At work, he wanted to look competent. With friends, he wanted to look successful. With family, he wanted to look responsible. Here, none of that mattered. He could simply be himself. The next morning, Daniel woke up early. He decided to visit an old neighborhood on the other side of the city. He took the subway. At first, everything went smoothly. Then he got off at the wrong station. Daniel looked around. Nothing looked familiar. He checked his phone. The map showed a long walking route. His battery was at 12%. Daniel started to worry. He walked for 15 minutes, then 20. He could not find the street. He stopped outside a small shop. An older woman was standing near the door. Daniel took a deep breath. He walked over. "Excuse me," he said. The woman looked at him. "Can you help me?" she asked. She nodded. Daniel showed her the address. She pointed in one direction, then another. Daniel understood only a few words. He smiled awkwardly. "Sorry, my English is not very good." The woman smiled. "It's okay." She used her hands to explain. Daniel laughed. She laughed too. They eventually understood each other. She pointed toward the street. Daniel thanked her. As he walked away, he realized something. Communication was not only about words. Sometimes a smile helped. Sometimes a gesture helped. Sometimes patience helped. And sometimes you simply had to try. He found the neighborhood. It was beautiful. Old buildings stood beside narrow streets. Children played outside. People sat in small cafes. Laundry hung from balconies. Daniel spent the entire afternoon taking photographs. At sunset, he sat on a bench. He looked through the pictures on his camera. One photograph caught his attention. It showed an old woman standing in front of her small shop. She was smiling. Daniel remembered how she had helped him earlier. He liked the picture, but he liked the memory even more. That evening, Daniel returned to the hotel. He uploaded the photographs to his computer. Then he opened his notebook. He wrote, "I was afraid I would not understand people. But maybe understanding is not about speaking perfectly. Maybe it is about being willing to listen." Daniel stared at the sentence. It reminded him of something else. His English journey. For years he had been afraid to speak because he might make mistakes. He had wanted to wait until his English was perfect. But that day, he had spoken with a stranger. He had made mistakes. He had misunderstood things, and nothing terrible happened. Maybe perfection had been another form of fear. The days passed quickly. Daniel visited museums. He walked through markets. He took trains to nearby towns. He talked to strangers. He tried local food. He made mistakes. He laughed at himself. He learned new words. He became more comfortable speaking English. And every night, he wrote, not about success, not about money, about people, about moments, about life. On the 7th day, Daniel received a message from his mother. "How are you?" He replied, "I'm happy." She answered, "Really?" Daniel thought about it. He typed, "Yes, I think I forgot what happy felt like." His mother replied with a heart. Daniel smiled. That night, he went to a small hill outside the city. From the top, he could see the lights below. He sat down. The wind was cold. He opened his notebook. He wrote a question. What did I learn? Then he began answering. I learned that fear does not always mean stop. I learned that small steps matter. I learned that people are kinder than I expected. I learned that I can survive being uncomfortable. I learned that I do not need to know everything. I learned that life can change when I make one decision. He stopped writing. Then he added one final sentence. I learned that I was not waiting for the right time. I was waiting for permission. Daniel closed the notebook. He looked at the city. Who had he been waiting for? His manager? His parents? His friends? Society? Maybe no one. Maybe he had simply been waiting for himself. The next morning was his last day. Daniel packed his suitcase. Before leaving the hotel, he looked around the room. It was only a small room, but it had become part of his story. He checked out. Then he walked through the city one last time. He returned to the street where the old woman had helped him. Her shop was open. She recognized him. She smiled. Daniel showed her the photograph he had taken. Her eyes became wide. She pointed at herself. Daniel nodded. Yes, it's you. She smiled. Daniel asked if he could give her a copy. She nodded. He printed the photograph at a nearby shop and returned. The woman held the picture carefully. She said something in her language. Daniel did not understand, but he understood her smile. Sometimes that was enough. When Daniel reached the airport, he sat near the window. His trip was ending, but he did not feel sad. He felt different, not completely different. He still had fears. He still had questions. He still did not know what his future would look like. But he trusted himself more. On the plane, Daniel opened his notebook. He turned to the first page. The old list was still there. Travel, learn English, take photographs, write, see the ocean, meet new people, try something new. Almost everything on the list had happened. But then he noticed something. The list was no longer enough. He took out his pen. At the bottom of the page, he wrote, live. Just one word. He underlined it. Then he closed the notebook. Daniel looked out of the airplane window. The clouds moved slowly beneath him. He thought about the future. He knew going home would not magically solve everything. He still needed a job. He still needed money. He still needed to build a new career. He still had responsibilities. But he had learned something important. A meaningful life was not a life without problems. It was a life where the problems were worth solving. Daniel smiled. The plane continued through the sky, and for the first time, he was not afraid of what waited for him when he returned home. He was curious. That was different. Fear had controlled him for years. Now curiosity was beginning to take its place. But Daniel did not know that one more challenge was waiting for him at home. A challenge that would test whether all the changes he had made were real. Because changing your life for a few weeks is easy. The real test begins when you return to the place where you used to be. And Daniel was about to find out whether he could keep moving forward. Part 5. A New Beginning. When Daniel returned home, everything looked the same. The same streets, the same buildings, the same bus stops, the same small apartment. But Daniel felt different. He put his suitcase on the floor and stood quietly in the middle of his living room. 3 months ago, he had sat in that same room and wondered what was missing from his life. Now he knew. It was not one thing. He had not needed a new job. He had not needed more money. He had not needed a bigger apartment. He had needed to start living with intention. Daniel opened his suitcase. He took out his camera, then his notebook. He placed both on his desk. His notebook was full of sentences. Some were about fear, some were about courage, some were about people he had met, and some were simply small observations about ordinary moments. Daniel opened his laptop. He needed to find a new job. That reality had not disappeared while he was traveling. His savings would not last forever. He needed an income. He searched for jobs for several hours. There were many possibilities. Some sounded interesting. Others looked exactly like his old job. Daniel applied for 3 positions. Then he closed the laptop. He did not want to spend the entire day searching. He went outside. He walked to a small coffee shop near his apartment. He ordered a drink and sat beside the window. A young man at the next table was talking loudly on the phone. An old woman was reading a book. 2 students were studying together. A waiter was carrying several cups of coffee. Daniel watched them. Before his trip, he might not have noticed any of them. He took out his camera. He did not take any photographs. He simply watched. Sometimes paying attention was enough. After a while, Daniel opened his notebook. He wrote, "Coming home is strange. The place has not changed, but I have." He closed the notebook. Then he looked at his phone. There was a message from Emma. "How does it feel to be back?" Daniel replied, "Good, a little scary." Emma answered, "Scary is normal." Daniel smiled. That evening, he visited his parents. His mother opened the door. She hugged him. "You're thinner." Daniel laughed. "You always say that. And you always need to eat more." His father came into the room. So what? Did you find what you were looking for?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Not exactly." "Good. Daniel laughed. You really like that answer. His father sat down, because life is not a treasure hunt with one hidden box. Daniel sat beside him. Then what is it? His father looked at him. Maybe it is learning how to enjoy the road. Daniel became quiet. He thought about the trip. He remembered the train, the ocean, the old woman, the small restaurant, the people he had met, the mistakes he had made. None of those moments had been part of his original plan, but they had become the most important part of the journey. His father continued, You left because you wanted a different life. Daniel nodded. But don't make another mistake. What mistake? Thinking you need to keep changing everything. Daniel looked at him. His father smiled. You don't need to travel every month. You don't need to quit every job. You don't need to become famous. He paused. You only need to make sure your life belongs to you. His life belongs to him. That night, Daniel returned home. He opened his laptop again. This time, he did not search for jobs. He opened a blank document. At the top, he wrote, My Journey. Then he started writing. He wrote about the old man in the park. He wrote about the notebook. He wrote about the promotion. He wrote about the ocean. He wrote about being lost in a foreign city. He wrote about the old woman who helped him. He wrote about fear. He wrote about waiting. And he wrote about the moment he finally understood that nobody was coming to give him permission to live. He had to give himself permission. Daniel wrote until midnight. When he finished, he read the whole story. It was not perfect, but it was honest. He saved the file, then he printed a copy. The next morning, he sent it to a small magazine that published travel stories. He did not expect anything. He had learned not to expect too much from one decision. He simply wanted to try. Then he continued looking for work. 2 weeks passed. Daniel received several job interviews. One company offered him a position. It was not his dream job, but it offered flexible hours. That mattered to him. The salary was lower than his previous job, but Daniel had enough savings to manage. He accepted. On his first day, he arrived at the new office. The building was smaller, the team was smaller, the salary was smaller, but Daniel felt comfortable. At lunch, one of his new coworkers asked, Why did you leave your old company? Daniel thought about the question. He could have given a simple answer, I wanted a change. Instead, he smiled. I realized I was waiting too much. The coworker looked confused. Waiting for what? Daniel laughed. That's a long story. Maybe it was, but it was also the story of his life. Months passed. Daniel continued learning English. 30 minutes every evening. Sometimes more. He still made mistakes. He still forgot words. Sometimes he listened to a sentence 3 times and understood nothing. But he no longer felt embarrassed. He had learned that progress was not always obvious. Some days he learned 10 new words. Some days he remembered only 1. But 1 word was still better than 0. He also continued taking photographs. On weekends he walked around the city. He photographed ordinary things, people waiting for buses, children playing in parks, rain falling on windows, a man opening his shop early in the morning, a woman carrying flowers home. Daniel began to understand that beautiful moments were everywhere. You just had to slow down enough to see them. One afternoon, while checking his email, Daniel saw a message from the magazine. His hands became cold. He opened it. They had read his story. They wanted to publish it. Daniel stared at the screen. He read the message twice. Then he laughed. It was not a huge magazine. It would not make him rich. But that did not matter. Someone had read his words. Someone had connected with his experience. Daniel printed the email. Then he put it inside his notebook. At the top of the page he wrote, Keep going. A few weeks later, the story was published. Daniel received messages from several readers. One message came from a young man. He wrote that he had been unhappy with his job for years. He said Daniel's story had made him think about his own life. Another reader said she had always wanted to travel, but was afraid to go alone. She said she was planning her first trip. Daniel read the messages slowly. He realized something. His journey was no longer only about him. The choices he had made might help someone else make a choice too. That thought meant more to him than money. One evening, Daniel went back to the park where he had met the old man. He sat on the same bench. The park looked almost exactly the same. He looked around, but the old man was not there. Daniel waited. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. No old man. He wondered if he would ever see him again. Then he noticed an older man sitting on another bench. For a moment, Daniel thought it was him. He stood up. He walked closer. It was not the same man. Daniel smiled. He returned to his bench. He looked at the birds. He remembered the photograph that had changed his life. Then he took out his notebook. He wrote, "Some people enter our lives for only a few minutes, but their words can stay with us for years." He closed the notebook. The sun was beginning to set. Daniel sat quietly. He thought about the person he had been 3 months earlier. That Daniel had believed life would begin someday. After he earned more money, after he got a better position, after he became more confident, after he had more time, after everything was perfect. But perfect never came. And maybe it was never supposed to. Daniel finally understood the lesson. Life does not become meaningful when everything becomes easy. Life becomes meaningful when we stop waiting for everything to become easy. We make choices, we make mistakes, we change direction, we start again. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we fail, but we keep moving. Not because we know exactly where we are going, because we trust ourselves enough to take the next step. Daniel looked at the sky. He smiled. He still had dreams. He wanted to visit more countries. He wanted to improve his English. He wanted to take better photographs. He wanted to write more stories. Maybe one day he would even write a book. He didn't know, and for once, not knowing did not scare him. It excited him. He stood up. He put his notebook into his bag. Then he walked home. The next morning, his alarm rang at 6:30. Daniel opened his eyes. For a moment, everything felt familiar. The ceiling, the room, the morning light. Then he smiled. He got out of bed, he made coffee, he opened his notebook. On the first page was the old list: travel, learn English, take photographs, write, see the ocean, meet new people, try something new. And underneath it was the final word he had written before his trip: live. Daniel looked at the list. Then he turned to a new page. He wrote, new dreams. He did not know what he would write yet, so he waited. But this time he was not waiting for life to begin. He was simply giving himself a moment to think. Then he picked up his pen, and he began. The end. The lesson from Daniel's story is simple. You do not need to have your whole life figured out. You do not need to know exactly where you will be 5 years from now. You do not need to wait until you feel completely ready. Sometimes, all you need is one small step, one conversation, one decision, one new habit, one trip, one page in a notebook, one moment when you choose to stop saying, someday. Because someday is not a date on the calendar. It is a word we often use when we are afraid. We say, someday I will travel. Someday I will learn English. Someday I will start writing. Someday I will change my life. But someday only becomes real when we turn it into today. Daniel did not change his life in one morning. He changed it through many small decisions. He listened to English for 30 minutes. He went hiking. He took a photograph. He entered a competition. He traveled alone. He spoke to strangers. He made mistakes. He turned down an opportunity that was not right for him. He accepted uncertainty. And slowly, those small choices became a new life. That is how change often works, quietly, one step at a time. You may not see the difference today, you may not see it tomorrow, but if you keep moving, one day you may look back and realize that the person you used to be is no longer the person you are. And perhaps that is one of the most beautiful things about being alive. You are allowed to change, you are allowed to start again, you are allowed to choose a different road. You are allowed to say, this is not the life I want, and then ask, what can I do about it? You do not need a perfect answer. You only need the courage to take the next step. So if there is something you have been waiting to do, Remember, Daniel, maybe you do not need to wait anymore. Maybe today is not the day when everything changes. Maybe today is simply the day when you take the first small step. And sometimes, one small step is enough to begin an entirely different journey.